The canvas was still damp with paint when the last rancher's wife walked past without even glancing at the portrait propped against the weathered storefront. And Adelaide Emerson felt something crack inside her chest that had nothing to do with the bitter February wind sweeping through Carlin, Nevada, in 1882. She had been in this dusty railroad town for 6 months now, setting up her easel on the wooden sidewalk every morning except Sundays, watching the miners and cattle drivers and railroad workers pass by with barely a nod. Her fingers were perpetually stained with oils and charcoal, her second-best dress spotted with paint she could never quite wash out, and her savings from back east were dwindling faster than snow in the desert sun. The portraits she painted were good, she knew that much. Her teacher in Philadelphia had told her she had a rare gift for capturing not just faces but souls, the essence of a person in the set of their eyes or the curve of their mouth. But here in Nevada, surrounded by practical people who spent their days breaking rock or herding cattle, no one seemed to want their soul captured on canvas. Adelaide pulled her shawl tighter and studied the portrait before her. It showed old Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house, painted during a rare moment of stillness, her weathered face soft with memory. Adelaide had spent hours on the light, getting the way it fell across those deep wrinkles just right, but Mrs. Henderson had shaken her head and said she had no money for such foolishness. Most people said the same, or variations of it. Some were kinder about the rejection than others. The sun was starting its descent toward the Ruby Mountains when Adelaide finally began packing up her supplies. She was carefully wrapping her brushes in an old cloth when a shadow fell across her workspace, and she looked up to see a man she had noticed around town but never spoken to. He was tall, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in summer. His clothes marked him as a working cowboy, the kind who spent more time in the saddle than in town, his hat battered from use rather than affectation, his boots scuffed and dusty. "You are the portrait painter," he said, and it was not quite a question. His voice had a rough edge to it, like he did not use it often. "I am," Adelaide replied, straightening up and trying not to look as desperate as she felt. "Adelaide Emerson, are you interested in commissioning a portrait?" He looked at the painting she had propped against the storefront, his gaze moving slowly from one to another. She had perhaps a dozen finished works, people who had sat for her either for practice or with promises of payment that never materialized. Each rejection stung, but she kept them displayed anyway, hoping someone would see the value in her work. "How much?" he asked finally. Adelaide hesitated. She had been lowering her prices steadily since arriving in Carlin, trying to find a number that would not send people running. $5, she said, then quickly added, "for a head and shoulders portrait, 7 for half length. I can work from life or from a photograph if you have one." "I do not have a photograph," he said. "Never saw the point, but I would like you to paint me, full figure if you can manage it." "I will pay whatever that costs." Adelaide felt her heart skip. A full-length portrait would take more time, more canvas, more paint. $15, she said, expecting him to balk. 15 it is. He pulled off his hat, revealing hair flattened from wear. "Name is Samuel Ellis. Most folks call me Sam. I work at the Triple Cross Ranch about 8 miles north of here. When would you want me to sit for you?" "Tomorrow." Adelaide tried to keep the eagerness from her voice. "I have a room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. There is good light in the parlor in the morning. Would 10 o'clock suit you?" "I will be there," Sam said. He settled his hat back on his head, tipped it slightly in farewell, and walked away before Adelaide could say anything more. She stood there on the sidewalk, watching him disappear around the corner toward the livery stable, and felt something she had not felt in months. Hope, maybe. or just relief that she might finally have enough money to buy more canvas and pay another month's rent. That night, lying in her narrow bed at the boarding house, Adelaide could not sleep. She kept thinking about Samuel Ellis, trying to picture how she would pose him, what she would do with the background. There was something in his face that intrigued her, a quiet strength mixed with a loneliness she recognized, because she saw it in her own mirror every morning. She had come west after her father died, leaving behind a Philadelphia that held too many memories and not enough opportunities for a woman who wanted to paint rather than marry. Her mother had been horrified. Her sisters had called her foolish. But Adelaide had packed her paints and brushes and taken the train as far as her money would allow, ending up in Carlin, because the ticket seller had said there was a boom town that might need an artist. The boom, such as it was, seemed to have passed her by entirely. Samuel arrived the next morning at exactly 10 o'clock, cleaned up and wearing what must have been his best shirt, though it was still clearly a working man's clothes. He looked uncomfortable but determined, like he was about to undergo some necessary ordeal. "Come in," Adelaide said, leading him to the parlor where she had already set up her easel and arranged a chair near the window. Mrs. Henderson had been surprisingly cooperative when Adelaide explained she finally had a paying customer, even offering to make sure no one disturbed them during the sitting. "How do you want me?" Sam asked, and there was something endearing about his awkwardness. Adelaide studied him, then the light. "Stand here," she said, guiding him to a spot where the morning sun fell across his face at an angle. "Not too stiff. Just stand naturally, like you are waiting for something. You can rest your hand on the back of this chair if you like." He did as she instructed, and she stepped back to observe. Yes, this would work. She could see it already, the way she would capture the breadth of his shoulders, the way he stood with his weight slightly on one leg, the quiet watchfulness in his expression. "This will take several sessions," she told him as she began sketching the basic composition on her canvas. "Maybe 5 or 6, each about 2 hours. Can you manage that?" "I have the time," Sam said. "Told my boss I needed mornings off for a spell. He grumbled but agreed." They fell into silence as Adelaide worked, her charcoal moving quickly across the canvas. She glanced up at him frequently, studying the planes of his face, the way his hand rested on the chair back, the set of his shoulders. He was patient, she noted. Most people fidgeted or wanted to talk, but Sam seemed content to stand quietly and let her work. After about 20 minutes, Adelaide said, "You can relax a little. We will take breaks so you do not get too tired." "I am fine," Sam said, but she noticed he shifted his weight slightly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you come here? To Carlin, I mean. This is not the sort of place where folks usually want portrait paintings." Adelaide kept sketching, grateful to have something to do with her hands while she answered. "I needed somewhere to go, and Carlin seemed as good as anywhere. I thought maybe there would be people with money from the mines or the railroad who would want their portraits done. I was wrong, apparently." "You were not wrong," Sam said quietly. "People here have money. They just do not know what to do with beauty when they see it." Adelaide's hand stilled on the canvas. She looked at him, but his expression had not changed. He was not flirting, she realized. He was simply stating what he believed to be fact. "Why did you commission a portrait?" she asked. "If you do not mind my asking." Sam was quiet for a long moment. "I spent most of my life being invisible," he finally said. "Grew up in an orphanage in Kansas, came west when I was 16 to work cattle, never had much to call my own except my horse and saddle. Figured maybe it was time I left some proof I existed. Something that said Samuel Ellis was here, mattered enough for someone to take the time to really see him." The honesty of it hit Adelaide square in the chest. She understood that feeling, that need to be seen and remembered. It was why she painted, why she had fought her family to pursue this impossible career. "I will make sure people see you," she said softly. "I promise." The first sitting lasted 2 hours, and by the end, Sam's shoulders were tight with fatigue, though he never complained. Adelaide paid close attention as she worked, not just to his physical form but to the small details that revealed character. The way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she made an observation he found amusing. The unconscious habit he had of touching the brim of his hat when he was thinking, even when he was not wearing it. The careful way he moved, like someone used to being around skittish animals. "Same time tomorrow?" Adelaide asked as she walked him to the door. "I will be here," Sam said. He paused, then added, "Thank you for taking this seriously. I know it probably seems strange, a cowboy wanting his portrait painted." "It does not seem strange at all," Adelaide assured him. "It seems exactly right." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face, and Adelaide felt something flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger or nerves. Over the next week, Samuel came every morning at 10 o'clock. Adelaide worked on the portrait, building up layers of paint, adjusting colors, capturing the essence of the man standing before her. They talked during the sessions, careful conversations at first that gradually deepened into something more substantial. She learned that he had been at the Triple Cross Ranch for 6 years, working his way up from hired hand to foreman. He was 26 years old, liked his coffee black and his eggs scrambled, and had once broken his arm being thrown from a particularly ornery Mustang. "You have family?" Adelaide asked during the fourth sitting, mixing ochre and burnt sienna to get the exact shade of his sun-weathered skin. "No," Sam said. "The orphanage was the closest I came. Some of the hands at the ranch are like brothers, I suppose, but no blood family that I know of. What about you?" "Mother and 2 sisters back in Philadelphia," Adelaide said. "They think I am insane for coming out here. My father understood, though. He was a painter too, just not a very successful one. He always told me to follow what mattered to me, even if it was difficult. He sounds like a good man." He was. Adelaide focused on her canvas, using the work to push past the ache that still came when she thought of her father. "He died a year ago. Pneumonia. Everything felt wrong after that, like the city was pressing in on me. I needed space, needed to see if I could actually make a living with my painting. So far the answer seems to be no." "You will," Sam said with surprising conviction. "You have real talent, Adelaide. Anyone with eyes can see that." She looked up at him, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere and given her not just money but faith in her work. Their eyes met across the parlor, and something passed between them that made Adelaide's breath catch. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, needing to break the sudden tension. "What is it like?" Sam's face softened as he described the Triple Cross, the rolling grasslands and the way the mountains looked at sunrise, the sound of cattle moving across the range and the feeling of a good horse beneath him. He talked about the hard work and the simple pleasures, the satisfaction of helping birth a calf or breaking a young horse to saddle. Adelaide painted and listened, and somewhere in the process she realized she was not just capturing his physical form but his spirit, everything that made him who he was. By the 6th sitting, the portrait was nearly complete. Adelaide had painted him standing tall, his hand resting on the chair back, his gaze direct and honest. She had gotten the light right, the way it illuminated one side of his face while leaving the other in softer shadow. His work clothes looked worn but respectable, and she had paid careful attention to details like the worn leather of his belt and the faded blue of his shirt. But it was his expression that she was most proud of. She had captured that quality she had noticed from the beginning, the quiet strength mixed with loneliness, but also something new, a hint of hope in his eyes that had not been there when they started. "It is finished," Adelaide said, stepping back from the easel. "Would you like to see it?" Sam moved around to look at the portrait, and Adelaide held her breath. This was always the worst moment, waiting to see if the subject would recognize themselves, if they would see what she had tried to capture. He stared at the painting for a long time without speaking. Adelaide's hands twisted in her paint-stained apron, her heart hammering. Had she gotten it wrong? Was he disappointed? "That is who I want to be," Sam finally said, his voice rough. "You painted who I want to be." "I painted who you are," Adelaide corrected gently. "I only showed what was already there." He turned to look at her then, and there were tears in his eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. "You see me," he said. "Really see me. I did not know how much I needed that until now." Adelaide felt her own eyes stinging. "I see you," she confirmed. "You are not invisible, Sam. Not to me." He crossed the parlor in 2 long strides and took her hands, heedless of the paint that still stained her fingers. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I have been trying to find the right words all week, but there are not any right words, so I am just going to say it plain. I think I am falling in love with you, Adelaide. Maybe already have fallen. I know it is fast. I know you probably think I am a fool, but I cannot let you finish this portrait and walk out of my life without telling you how I feel." Adelaide's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "You are not a fool," she whispered. "I have been feeling the same thing. Every morning when you walk through that door, I feel like I can breathe again. Like the world makes sense in a way it has not for a very long time." "Then maybe," Sam said carefully, hopefully, "this does not have to end with the portrait. Maybe we could see where this goes." "I would like that," Adelaide said. And then somehow they were kissing, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as relief and joy and longing all mixed together. His hands cupped her face with surprising gentleness, and she could feel the calluses on his palms, the evidence of his hard-working life. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sam was smiling wider than she had ever seen. "I need to pay you," he said, pulling back reluctantly. $15 as agreed. "Sam, you do not have to. A deal is a deal," he said firmly, pulling out a small leather pouch. He counted out the money carefully, placing it in her palm. "You earned this. More than earned it." Adelaide accepted the money, knowing it would be an insult to refuse. "What will you do with the portrait?" she asked. "Hang it in my room at the ranch," Sam said immediately. "I have a small foreman's cabin now, just got it last month. It has 4 walls that are mostly bare. This will go right over the fireplace where I can see it every day. Proof that Samuel Ellis exists, painted by the woman who sees him better than anyone ever has." The next Sunday, Sam took Adelaide out to see the Triple Cross Ranch. They rode in a borrowed wagon. Adelaide perched on the wooden seat beside him as the horses pulled them out of Carlin and into the open rangeland. The day was bright and cold, typical for Nevada in late February, but Adelaide barely noticed the chill. She was too aware of Sam beside her, the warmth of his shoulder occasionally brushing hers as the wagon jolted over ruts in the road. The ranch was everything Sam had described, and more. The main house was large and sturdy, built to withstand the harsh Nevada weather, and there were several outbuildings including a bunkhouse, barn, and corrals. Cattle dotted the landscape, dark shapes against the pale winter grass, and mountains rose in the distance like the backbone of the world. "That is my place," Sam said, pointing to a small cabin set slightly apart from the other buildings. "Not much, but it is mine." He helped her down from the wagon and led her to the cabin. Inside was a single room with a stone fireplace, a bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, and some shelves holding his few possessions. It was spare but clean, the space of a man who had learned to live with little. And there, hanging above the fireplace exactly as he had promised, was her portrait of him. "You hung it already," Adelaide said, moving closer to look at it. The painting looked different here in the space where Sam actually lived. It seemed to belong, to make sense in a way her other portraits never had in her makeshift display outside the general store. "Put it up the day I brought it home," Sam said. "The other hands came by to see it. Most of them want to know if you would paint them too." Adelaide turned to stare at him. "Really? Really? There are 15 men working this ranch, and about half of them told me they would be interested in having their portrait done if the price was not too steep. Some want to send them home to their families. Others just want them for themselves. I told them you would probably work something out." For a moment Adelaide could not speak. After months of rejection, suddenly she had the possibility of 7 or 8 commissions, maybe more. "Sam, I do not know what to say." "Say you will stick around Carlin a while longer," Sam said, moving to stand beside her. "Say you will keep painting and maybe spend some time with a cowboy who is already planning how to court you properly." Adelaide laughed, the sound bright with relief and joy. "I will definitely stick around. Though I have to warn you, I do not know anything about ranching or cattle or any of this world you live in." "That is all right," Sam said, slipping his arm around her waist. "I do not know anything about painting or art. We can teach each other." They stood there together in his small cabin, looking at the portrait that had brought them together, and Adelaide felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This strange, unlikely connection with a cowboy in a dusty Nevada town was the most right thing that had happened to her in years. Over the next months, Adelaide's life transformed in ways she could never have predicted. The Triple Cross Ranch hands proved true to their word, and she found herself busy with commissions for the first time since coming west. She painted cowboys and ranch workers, capturing them in their work clothes, sometimes with their horses or dogs, always with the same care and attention she had given to Sam's portrait. Word spread beyond the ranch too, to neighboring spreads and even into town. The mine foreman commissioned a portrait to send to his wife back east. The railroad supervisor wanted one of himself and his 2 sons. Mrs. Henderson finally asked for a portrait of herself, saying she wanted her grandchildren to have something to remember her by. Adelaide raised her prices slightly and people paid without complaint. She was not getting rich, but she was making a living, actually supporting herself through her art. The vindication was sweet, but not as sweet as the evenings she spent with Sam. He courted her properly, as old-fashioned as it sounded. He took her on picnics when the weather allowed, brought her wildflowers that grew on the range island, taught her to ride so they could explore the land together. She painted him again, this time on horseback, because she wanted to capture him in his element. He posed for her with surprising patience, controlling his horse with subtle shifts of weight while she worked to get the proportions right. They talked endlessly during these times together. Sam told her about his childhood in the orphanage, the hunger that was more emotional than physical, the loneliness of growing up without anyone who truly belonged to him. Adelaide shared her own pain, the loss of her father, the feeling of being trapped in a world that wanted to make her into something she was not. They understood each other in a way that went beyond words, 2 people who had been invisible finding visibility in each other's eyes. By June, when the Nevada heat turned the landscape golden and shimmering, Sam asked her to marry him. They were sitting by a creek on Triple Cross land, Adelaide's skirt spread around her on the grass, Sam's hat pushed back on his head. He did not have a ring yet, he apologized, but he had a question that could not wait any longer. "I love you," he said simply. I want to build a life with you. I know I do not have much to offer beyond a foreman's cabin and a good horse, but I will spend every day trying to make you happy if you will have me." Adelaide looked at this man who had commissioned a portrait when no one else would, who had hung it with pride in his small cabin, who had somehow seen value in her when she was struggling to see it in herself. "You have everything to offer," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "And yes, I will marry you. I love you, Sam. I cannot imagine my life without you in it." They married in August, a simple ceremony at the small church in Carlin with Mrs. Henderson and the Triple Cross Ranch hands as witnesses. Adelaide wore a new dress, cream-colored with lace at the collar, and Sam wore his best suit which he had bought specially for the occasion. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Sam kissed her, the cowboys cheered and threw their hats in the air. They moved into the foreman's cabin together, and Adelaide set up a corner as her studio. It was cramped but workable, and she found she did not mind the close quarters. Sam was neat and considerate, always careful not to disturb her paints or brushes, and she learned to time her work around his schedule at the ranch. The portrait of Sam still hung over the fireplace, and now she added others, paintings of the landscape she was coming to love, of the horses and cattle, of the changing light over the Ruby Mountains. Her second portrait of Sam, the one on horseback, she kept for herself. It hung in their bedroom, a reminder of how he looked most at home, doing the work he loved. The first winter of their marriage was harsh, with snow that buried the rangeland and temperatures that dropped well below freezing. Adelaide learned to cook on the small stove, to mend Sam's work clothes, to keep the cabin warm and comfortable. She painted less during these months, but she did not mind. There was something deeply satisfying about building a home with Sam, about the quiet evenings spent reading or talking by the fire, about falling asleep in his arms and waking to see the portrait watching over them. She also discovered she was pregnant in December, the realization coming with a mixture of joy and terror. She had never thought much about children, too focused on her art and her need to prove herself, but now the reality of it filled her with unexpected happiness. "We are going to have a baby," she told Sam one evening, watching his face carefully. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His eyes went wide, then bright with tears, and he pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he repeated like he could not quite believe it. "Our baby. Adelaide, are you sure?" "I am sure," she said, laughing at his expression. "The doctor in town confirmed it. The baby should come in July when the weather is warm." Sam pulled back, his hands on her shoulders, his face serious now. "I am going to be a father. I am going to have a family, real family, blood family." Adelaide understood the weight of those words for a man who had grown up in an orphanage. "You are going to be a wonderful father," she said firmly. "I have absolutely no doubt about that." He kissed her then, soft and reverent, his hand already moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "I will take care of you both," he promised, "whatever it takes." The pregnancy was easier than Adelaide had feared, though she tired more quickly and had to adjust her painting schedule. The ranch hands treated her like precious cargo, offering to carry her easel or fetch her water, and Sam fussed over her constantly. She painted through most of it, finding that pregnancy actually seemed to sharpen her artistic vision somehow. The portraits she completed during this time were some of her best work, rich with color and emotion. Their son was born on a blazing July day in 1883, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the entire ranch. Sam held him with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, unable to speak for several minutes. Adelaide, exhausted but elated, watched her husband cradle their baby and felt her heart expand beyond what she thought possible. They named him Robert Ellis, after Adelaide's father, and he had Sam's dark hair and Adelaide's gray eyes. Sam took to fatherhood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything, learning to change diapers and mix formula when Adelaide needed rest, pacing the cabin floor at night when the baby would not settle. Adelaide captured these moments in quick sketches, wanting to remember every detail of their first months as a family. She painted less that first year, too absorbed in motherhood and the daily rhythms of ranch life. But she did paint one more portrait, this time of Sam holding baby Robert, both of them bathed in the golden light of a Nevada sunset. It was her favorite work, the culmination of everything she had learned about capturing not just physical form but love and connection. She hung it in the main room next to Sam's original portrait, a testament to how far they had both come. By the time Robert was walking, Adelaide had resumed painting regularly, though now she scheduled her work around her family. She found she did not resent the adjustment. If anything, motherhood and marriage had deepened her art, given her new subjects and new understanding of human emotion. She painted Sam with Robert playing in the dust outside the cabin, the ranch hands teaching her son to pet horses. The ranch continued to prosper, and Sam was given more responsibility and a raise in pay. They talked about eventually saving enough to buy their own small spread, maybe just a few acres with some cattle and horses. It felt possible now, this future they were building together. When Robert was 3, Adelaide became pregnant again. This time it was a daughter, born in the spring with a shock of red gold hair that came from neither parent but reminded Adelaide of her youngest sister. They named her Catherine, and she was as fierce and determined as her older brother was gentle and thoughtful. Sam doted on both children, this man who had grown up without family now surrounded by it, and Adelaide often caught him just watching them with an expression of wonder on his face. She painted them all, constantly. The walls of their cabin and then the larger house they eventually moved into when Sam became ranch manager were covered with her work. Portraits of Sam, of the children, of the landscape they called home, of the horses and cattle and the life they had built together. Some pieces she sold, building her reputation as the portrait artist of northeastern Nevada, but the best ones she kept for herself, a visual record of their love and life. Years passed in the way they do when life is full and good. Robert grew tall and serious, interested in books and ranching in equal measure. Catherine was all fire and spirit, learning to ride before she could properly read, tagging after her father wherever he went. Adelaide painted and taught art to other women in town who wanted to learn. Sam managed the ranch with skill and integrity, earning the respect of everyone who worked with him. They added to their family one more time when Adelaide was 32. Another son they named James, who came howling into the world during a thunderstorm, and seemed to carry that energy with him through childhood. 3 children, more than either Sam or Adelaide had dared to hope for, each one precious and unique and loved beyond measure. Adelaide never forgot those months of rejection and struggle, when she stood on the sidewalk in Carlin with her portraits that nobody would buy. Sometimes she would look at Sam's original portrait, still hanging in their home, and remember the day he walked up to her and asked how much for a painting. That single act of faith had changed everything, had given her not just a commission but a life, a love, a family she had not even known she wanted. "You ever regret it?" she asked Sam one evening when they were sitting on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Commissioning that first portrait, getting tangled up with a struggling artist, Sam looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Regret it? Adelaide, that portrait was the best $15 I ever spent. It brought me you. It brought me all of this." He gestured to their children, their home, the life spread out before them. "I would have paid 1,000 times that amount if I had known." "You said you wanted proof you existed," Adelaide said softly, "that you mattered enough for someone to see you." "And you gave me that," Sam said, taking her hand. "But you gave me so much more. You gave me a life worth documenting. You gave me reasons to be seen." Adelaide leaned against his shoulder, watching their children play as the sun set over the Nevada rangeland. The portrait painter nobody wanted had found the one person who saw value in her work, and in the process had found everything she needed: home, family, purpose, love. All because a cowboy had commissioned a portrait and hung it with pride, and in doing so had hung his heart on his sleeve where she could not help but see it. They grew old together in that house, surrounded by Adelaide's paintings and Sam's quiet strength. Their children grew up and started families of their own, but Robert stayed to help run the ranch, and Catherine married a neighboring rancher, and James became a veterinarian who specialized in horses. The grandchildren came, and Adelaide painted them too, capturing each new generation. In 1920, when Adelaide was 68 and Sam was 70, they celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered around them. The house was full of noise and love, and the portraits Adelaide had painted over the decades, a visual history of their life together. Sam's original portrait still hung above the fireplace in the place of honor, though it was joined now by dozens of others. "Tell us the story again," one of the grandchildren asked. "About how grandmother was painting portraits nobody would buy, and grandfather commissioned one." Sam and Adelaide exchanged glances, sharing the silent communication of people who had loved each other for decades. "Your grandmother was the most talented artist in Nevada," Sam began, "but nobody seemed to realize it except me. So I asked her to paint my portrait, and she made me look like someone worth seeing. And your grandfather hung it in his cabin with pride," Adelaide continued, picking up the story. "Right above his fireplace where everyone could see it. He was not ashamed or embarrassed to display it. He hung it like it mattered, like I mattered, and that changed everything." "Because he saw you," the grandchild said, having heard this story many times before. "Because we saw each other," Adelaide corrected gently. "I saw him through my painting, and he saw me through his faith in my work. Sometimes that is all love is, really. Two people who truly see each other and decide to keep looking." Sam reached over and took her hand, the same gesture he had made thousands of times over their decades together. His hands were more weathered now, marked with age spots and old scars from a lifetime of ranch work, but his grip was still strong and sure. "Best decision I ever made," he said. "Commissioning that portrait. Best decision I ever made was saying yes," Adelaide replied. "To the portrait, to the courtship, to all of it." They sat there surrounded by family, by the evidence of their long love made visible in paint and canvas, and felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. The portrait painter nobody wanted had become the portrait painter everybody sought out, but more importantly, she had become a wife, a mother, a grandmother, beloved and cherished. And the invisible cowboy from the orphanage had become a man who mattered, who had built a family and a legacy, who had been seen and loved exactly as he was. The portrait above the fireplace watched over them all, a young Sam frozen in time, his expression holding that mixture of strength and hope that Adelaide had captured so long ago. It was a reminder of where they had started, two lonely people who found each other in an unlikely place, and proof of what faith and love and truly seeing another person could build. When Sam passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Surrounded by family in the home they had built together, Adelaide made sure his portrait went with him, placed in his casket so everyone at the funeral could see the painting that had started everything. She painted one final portrait after that, of Sam as he had been in his later years, weathered and white-haired but still with those creek water eyes and that quiet strength. She hung it beside all the others, the visual story of their life together complete. Adelaide lived another 5 years, still painting until her hands became too unsteady to hold a brush. She spent her final years surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them proof that the struggling artist in Carlin, Nevada in 1882, had created something far more lasting than portraits. She had created a family, a legacy of love that would continue long after the paint had faded. When she passed at the age of 73, they buried her next to Sam under the Nevada sky they had both loved. And in the family home, maintained now by Robert and his children, the portraits remained. Dozens of them, hundreds eventually, a visual record of Adelaide Emerson Ellis's extraordinary life. But the place of honor above the fireplace was always reserved for that first portrait, the one of a young cowboy who had commissioned a painting when nobody else would, and in doing so had changed 2 lives forever. The story passed down through generations, told and retold, embellished and simplified, but always true in its core. She was painting portraits that nobody would buy. He commissioned one and hung it with pride. And from that simple act of faith and recognition, from truly seeing and being seen, a love story had grown that lasted a lifetime and beyond, painted in oils and lived in joy, as enduring as the desert landscape where it had begun.